Next session, the speakers, Mr. Vikram and Mrs. Prachi Modi from Aptus. So let me give you a brief about them. Mr. Vikram is working as a principal technical writer in Aptus India. He has 11 years of experience in technical communication. He is well versed with DDLC, content strategy, agile model, structured authoring, UX, and API documentation. He has also contributed to STC India Annual Conference in 2015. Going forward, Mrs. Prachi Modi. She is working as a junior tech writer in Aptus India. She has completed her post-graduation in IT recently and made a brave move to enter the field of technical communication. Maybe just like me. Although it is an early stint in her career, she has done automation to make some mundane tasks faster. They are going to speak on the topic, what is a usability quotient for the differently abled people. That's actually quite interesting, documentation for the differently abled people. So let's see what's in store. Thank you, guys.
Very good morning to all of you. So as you must be aware that this is the topic of today's presentation. So let me give you some brief background about how we came to this topic and what is the story behind it. So in one of the companies that I worked with, I came across a lady. She was blind, but still she was hired as a test engineer in the organization, which really triggered a thought that why can't we have documentation which would be useful for such people who are internal employee as well as who are external customers. So that is how we came to this topic, and we thought that let's have accessible documentation in our organization in Aptus. So we started a new project to have the accessibility documentation in place. So the topic is, what is your usability quotient for the differently abled people? So here there are multiple aspects to this topic. As you know, usability quotient is a trademark of Human Factors International and ISO also. And we'll talk about different categories of differently abled people. I mean, who falls under which category and what kind of documentation is available in general. Then we'll also touch base upon what is the exact difference between accessibility and usability. So most of us are aware about usability, but accessibility is the overlooked area in this part. So this is the agenda of today's session. So first of all, Prachi will give you overview about usability quotient, and then I'll talk about the differences between accessibility and usability. Then we'll talk about regulations around accessibility. Then we'll see the real life scenarios or the use cases for accessibility documentation. Then we'll talk about the importance or significance of this kind of documentation in digital world, and how we are going to achieve this accessibility as far as documentation is concerned. Then we'll talk about the testing part of accessibility, how we are going to test whether the document is really accessible to the customer or the target audience that we are focusing on. And then we'll see what lies in the future for audience in general. And then we'll open the floor for discussion and questions. So Prachi will give you an introduction to usability quotient.
Hi. So when we talk about usability quotient, it's a systematic evaluation of a design method to see if it includes all the necessary essential user-centered design activities. The reason why we need to quantify this is to evaluate what is the effectiveness of our communication with the stakeholder, or how effectively the system communicates with the stakeholders. There are many different approaches on how you can quantify this. The International Standards for Organization has laid down one of the rules for this. That is, usability is defined as the effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction with which specified users achieve specified goals in particular environments. So elaborating on this, when we talk about effectiveness, it is the accuracy and completeness with which your user is able to complete a task. It takes into consideration the completion rate. Your completion rate is a percentage of the amount of tasks that a user completes successfully. Efficiency is measured through your task time. That is the amount of time a particular user takes to complete a task. Satisfaction is measured through satisfaction questionnaire, which are conducted post the human interaction with the system. It could have standard questions such as, on a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult was this task to perform, or how informative was this information. So when we see all this, we can say that accessibility plays an important part in increasing your usability quotient. If a system is ineffective or inefficient, usability quotient decreases. If the system is difficult to navigate, or if the features are difficult to consume, your end users are not going to be satisfied with what you provide.
Then we come to accessibility and usability. So let me talk about accessibility first. So what is accessibility? Accessibility is about accessing the documentation, accessing the information, and everybody has the right to access the information in any form that we distribute to our subscribers or customers. So accessibility is about giving information which is in readable form, which is in accessible form, easy to navigate, easy to understand, and easy to handle. Then there are different technologies which come into picture when we talk about accessibility and usability. I'll talk about usability in the next slide. So first of all, let me talk about assistive technology, which is standing in between the users and the different devices. So in this particular picture, you can see that the people with disabilities, actually they are having some difficulty or challenges to access the technology, and with the help of different tools such as hardware and software, they can actually access the information. For example, suppose somebody has some injury, for example, carpal tunnel syndrome, then that person can use head-mounted pointer to access the information on the computer. Now there are 7 general principles when we talk about usability, and how these are related to the documentation. I'll explain these points. So it says that it has to be equitably used. It means that the information is useful for all people with diverse abilities, not just normal people or the healthy people, but the people with disabilities also. Then it says it has to be flexible enough. That it means it accommodates all range of people from all ages, from all expertise. They have the right to access the information. Then it has to be simple and intuitive. It means we should follow the minimalism principle. That document should not be very lengthy or verbose. Then the information has to be perceptible. That is, it has to be easy to understand to the end user. Then there has to be low tolerance of error. It means the document has to be correct, precise, and concise. And then there has to be low physical effort, that the people with disabilities should be able to access it easily with less efforts. And then the last principle says that size and space for approach and use, that the document has to be easy to navigate. Then it has to be small in size so that it will hold interest of the people who are reading it. And it has to be easy to print or pass on that information to other people. So keeping these usability principles in mind, we have to think about accessibility. So when we talk about accessibility and usability, actually these two areas go hand in hand because they have a common goal, that is of improving the user experience. So I'm going to give a general example which is not related to documentation, but it talks about a house in Denmark which has made the building accessible to people with disabilities. So you can see in this building, can you scroll a little down? Yeah, see the counter, it is little bit lower so that the people who are using the wheelchair can actually interact with the receptionist or cashier for that matter. Can you scroll down? Then in this premise, you will see there are different colors for the department so that people with low vision can actually make out which department is meant for what when the instructions are given. Scroll down. Yeah, and this is the lift which can be accessed from both the sides. So the patient with wheelchair can actually go pass through this lift with ease. And this is a staircase. It has, just a moment. It has a groove over here which tells that this is the second floor. So the blind people can actually see that they are on the second floor. And the color which is used in this building, they are also not very loud. They are white so that there should not be any difficulty for the colorblind people also. Now I'm going to show you an example of a company. They have implemented this accessibility end to end in their environment, and this is how we want to implement in Aptus. So let me play the video.
Double tap to open. We have customers with employees who have disabilities that are physically challenged from using the application. And we absolutely would like to provide a solution to all of our customers and all of their employees. Double tap and hold. Demo. Button. Demo. Ding. We think about user experience as always trying to strive for and increase the usability of our product. Also, being able to address markets where accessibility is required really opens up new doors for us.
I am a legally blind individual, so that means that I have some vision, but it's very low, so I'm considered blind.
Time off requests scheduled.
Touchscreens are very challenging. So I've been working with Kronos, making their products more accessible.
As we started down this journey, we really wanted to make sure we were working with the experts. So we engaged the Paciello group. We really got the insight and the advice that we needed from that team.
We've helped create guidelines and standards, internal standards, development standards. We've helped work with them on processes.
Building accessibility in from the beginning really changes the way we fundamentally think about and design the product. Once we've established accessibility as a standard within our development practice, it makes adding future features easier to be accessible.
And what Kronos has done is create an environment for which a product can be designed, developed, and then released, and it's fully accessible from day one.
I spent a lot of my summer here working on an app called the Kronos tablet app, and it will function with Zoom and reversed contrast and with voiceover.
Touchscreens provide a unique challenge to a visually impaired user. If you're touching a smooth glass screen, there really is no tactile feedback there. That's been addressed through the assistive technology. The touchscreen now becomes audible.
I am going to input a punch on my time card, so I'll use my finger to swipe right across the screen.
Kronos demo location. Context.
I don't have to touch any particular place on the screen as long as I'm swiping. It will still read the screen in the correct order.
Current user. Exit demo. Button. Punch. Button. Punch.
So now I'm on the punch menu and I'm going to swipe until I hear it tell me punch button.
Expand menu. Alerts. Your current location will be used. Punch. Button.
And I'll double tap to tell it to enter a punch.
Alert. Punch succeeded.
Now I'm going to demonstrate the zoom feature, which with a 3-finger tap enables the zoom, and as a low vision user, this allows me to enlarge the screen and navigate the application. Okay, so now I'm going to demonstrate invert colors, which is also known as reversed contrast. This accessibility feature reverses colors on the screen for a user that may have color blindness or have issues seeing specific colors. It's also a little bit easier on the eye. This way, the text is white, so that's where my eyes are going to focus on. One of the really cool things, this schedule in particular is color-coded, but say I can't see colors in the regular scheme. Now it appears in a color that I can see, and I'm able to use the color coding to have a more accessible schedule.
It has been a very good and very positive experience working with Kronos. They can now tell their clients our products are usable and accessible to people with disabilities.
I'm really excited about what we're doing with accessibility. There's really an opportunity to make the user experience for anyone to be better.
In the next slide, we'll talk about the regulations around accessibility. So in the US, there are different laws and regulations, and even around the world, there are different laws which are in place for the accessibility documentation. So Prachi will take over.
So there are many laws which govern accessibility. When we say accessibility, it means that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, interact, and navigate with our system. Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act mandates federal agencies to develop, procure, maintain, and use information and communication technologies that are accessible to all, regardless of whether he works for the federal government or not. ICT includes all devices, intranet and internet websites, your guides, your PDFs, your tech support, online training, and many more things. Also, web content accessibility guidelines are the guidelines laid down by the World Wide Web Consortium, that is the governing body of the web. These guidelines are the basis of accessibility laws in many countries. Even India follows those. So these guidelines are based on the 4 principles. That is number 1, perceivable. Your content that you provide should be available to all the senses, that is especially vision and hearing, through the browser or through assistive technologies such as screen enlargers, text-to-speech converters. It should be operable. The user should be able to interact with that through mouse, keyboard, either a joystick or any other assistive technology. The content should be understandable. That is, it should be clear and it should limit confusion and ambiguity. Robust. The content should be accessible by old technologies, new technologies, and assistive technologies alike. So when we talk about India, the Right of Persons with Disability Act was recently introduced last year in December 2016. Right now, it makes it mandatory only for the government websites, documents, and all the forms to be accessible to everyone. Also, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability identifies accessibility as a basic human right. So accessibility is not just about having another feature or having a new USP in your product, but it's about the right thing to do.
Now, in this slide, we'll talk about the scenarios about the differently able people and how they impact the lives of such people at large. So, Prachi.
So when we talk about vision empowerment can be partial to no vision in one or both the eyes. It can be increased or decreased sensitivity to certain colors, that is color blindness. How visually impaired people access our content is by modifying the way our content is presented, that is having enlarged text, having customized settings for fonts, images, and colors, using text-to-speech synthesizers, relying on the audio, relying on the transcripts and captions for the videos and multimedia. To make sure that these web browsing methods work, our content should be developed in such a way that the format and the content is independent to each other. The structure should be formatted correctly so that the screen reader is able to identify all the different tags, that is the headings, the tables, and everything. Also, some people are only able to see small portion of the screen at once, and some people perceive the colors and designs very differently. So we need to make sure that we don't rely only on color to convey a meaning. There should be redundancy in that. Some people rely only on computer because only on the keyboard to navigate a document because they cannot see the mouse pointer. So our content should be written in such a way that the different assistive technologies and browsers are able to present them in different outputs. Next, when we talk about auditory disabilities, that is deafness or low hearing, many people suffer from them. At least the ratio is around 3% of the worldwide audience suffer from this. People with hearing impairment rely on the audio transcript and captions from the video. So if we make any sample videos or any use cases videos, we need to make sure that there are audio transcripts for them. Yeah.
Next set of differently able people belong to mobility impairment. So this could be temporary or permanent. Suppose a person met with accident, then that person may be temporarily immobile for that particular instance. So and there are permanent impairments also. So in this situation, you can use on-screen keyboards, or if you are unable to use mouse, you can use keyboard tap function, or you can use head-mounted pointers. So such devices are available for the people with disabilities. Then there are cognitive impairments, which belong to mental conditions and learning disabilities, such as Down syndrome or dyslexia. So I'm going to show you a small video about a dyslexic kid.
The fact that over the summer, a child can go from basically nothing to having the world at their fingertips and being able to read and being willing to try, it's more than a miracle. I think it's more than anybody can expect. Even in kindergarten, Ajay was incredibly bright, but he couldn't read. The difficulty reading continued to second grade. Shortly after Anju was diagnosed with dyslexia, a friend of mine said she saw something online about a tool from Microsoft for kids with dyslexia. I made an appointment at our local Microsoft store. We went in, they downloaded learning tools, asked Anju to sit down, and my son read. It was amazing. Anju, in that moment, conquered this fear and realized that he could access something that had been inaccessible to him. I saw my little boy read and knew that here was an answer, that here was something that could change his life. Microsoft Learning Tools has been a miracle in our lives. He could get everything in the same font. He was able to lengthen his spaces between words, and that was amazing and so simple. Aj's been happier, more confident. He was living his life where the written word was an enemy, and now it's a thing to be conquered.
So you can see that how a person's life can change when accessibility tools or the technologies are available, and Microsoft has done a lot of work in this area. So it is a kind of role model for all of us to implement accessibility in our organization. So the next slide takes you to the significance of accessibility.
So why accessibility? Why should we focus on this area? Around 1.3 billion people worldwide experience disability in several forms, whether it's low vision, color blindness, hearing impairment, mobility issues. And governments all around the world are doing their best to create job opportunities, to create infrastructure which is easy to access for everyone. But accessibility should not only be limited to the physical world, it should also transcend into the digital area. Secondly, as technical writers, it's our job to educate people about our product. So we should make sure that what we are educating reaches everyone without any discrimination. Also, by making our content more easy to access, we get more subscribers and more outputs. Without that, we could be alienating around 20% of our end users, prospects, and customers. Secondly, making your content more accessible for the differently abled has also multiple benefits. That is, it becomes more easy to access even for the old age people. And old age people and customers are increasing in number who are relying on technology too much. Accessibility and search engine optimization go hand in hand. And as tech writers, it's our job to make sure that we focus on both the areas. Some of the areas where search engine optimization and accessibility overlaps are when we provide alternate text for images, or when we write descriptive text, when we provide audio captioning to videos. We'll get into detail in this regarding the how accessibility part. The third issue is legal compliance. Disney, Target, Netflix, they are big names who are in the past have been sued for having their content not accessible. Target recently had to pay 20 million in legal fees and was sued by the National Federation for Blind. It was asked to make its content accessible for each and every one.
Then making our content accessible, it is also a corporate social responsibility because it increases the subscribers, the customers, and the customer base for the organization, for their products and services, and even for the intellectual property of the organization. Then it also increases customer loyalty in a way that it retains the customer who are using your products, as well as it increases the customer satisfaction index of the organization. So it helps in auditing the particular company. So these are some of the examples which have already set a benchmark for maybe all of us to implement the accessibility documentation in our organization. So I'm going to quote some examples over here. So I'm going to show you the web page of Microsoft. So Microsoft has established a accessibility center for the differently abled people. If you scroll down, so they have set of documents for all kinds of people who are suffering from vision impairment, hearing impairment, speech impairment, mobility and learning impairment. So they have done a lot of work in this area, and they are not doing this for money, but this is to increase the subscribers, the customer retention, customer satisfaction index. Then there is another company, Accenture, which has given accessibility statements on their website and also the tips and tricks to make the documentation accessible to the differently abled people. Can you scroll down? So they actually explain how you can make the use of products using the different tips that are given on the website for the Accenture products. And then third. and Salesforce. So Aptus is working closely with Salesforce because they are using Salesforce platform to build the products, and Salesforce has done a lot of work in accessibility. So Aptus will go in this direction to make the products accessible and even the documentation accessible to the people with disabilities. Now these are the ways to achieve the accessibility. So you must be wondering, if we talk about accessibility concept, disability concept, how exactly we are going to implement it in the documentation. So these are the simple statements that are used to make your documentation accessible.
So for majority of us, maneuvering through a website, filling up online forms, seeking out information is a thing that we take for granted. But for some people, for differently abled people, it could be a daunting task. It's our job to try and make our content accessible to as many people as possible. Making a document accessible is easiest when it is done in the earlier stages of development. In that way, we can create documents that are inherently accessible and not have to create differently accessible documents. These are some of the guidelines through which we can achieve accessibility. Adding alternate text and caption for images. When a screen reader reads out the document and there's no alternate text, all it reads out is the file name of the image, that is image52.jpg or whatever. But if we add a brief text, it tells the reader what you wanted to convey through the image. Specifying the language attribute. Each document that we write should have a global attribute specified to that. It tells the screen reader to use the voice or the diction through which it will read out the document. Second, specify column headers, rows, and tables. That is, your table should be structured as simple as possible with rows and columns, and you need to specify which row is a column header. This helps the screen reader in identifying where the table starts. Avoiding blank spaces. Blank spaces and formatting spaces, all they do is create stutter when there's too much of them. They create stutter when a screen reader reads those aloud. Closed caption for all audio files that we discussed. Tagging a PDF. This is very important because when you create a document which is accessible and you deploy them as PDF, it's of no use if it's not a properly tagged PDF. Your PDF tags define the format of the document. The headings, the images, the tables, all those are defined in the tags. So this is very important. Do not rely only on color. When you rely only on color to convey information or to grab attention, colorblind people are not able to perceive those. The answer to this is not to remove the colors, because colors are a very effective way of grabbing attention, but to have redundant information over here. For example, links. Links are a very classic example of how redundant information works. That is color and underline. Adding accessibility disclaimer. Accessibility disclaimer tells your user where to go and whom to reach in case if they have problems accessing your documents. So for example, what we do in Aptus is built natively on Salesforce. And like my colleague showed, Vikram, that Salesforce has the accessibility guide. So we point our users over there saying that if you have any problem accessing our products or working with our products, you can go to Salesforce and it shows how to activate the accessibility mode, and that way you will be able to use the features that our products provide.
So I'll show you some accessibility testing examples. Suppose this is just a moment. So in the PDF document, suppose you want to check whether that document is accessible to the people with disabilities, you can go to the View tab, Tools, and you can actually check the accessibility of that document. And when you click this panel opens, and you can do full check of the document. So this is the accessibility checker options. So you can see there are different options. You can create accessibility report out of this, and you can check whether accessibility permission flag is set, whether document is not image only PDF, or whether the document is tagged or not. So whatever Prachi has mentioned in earlier slide, that how to achieve the accessibility, these are different functions that you can actually check whether the documentation is accessible to the user or not. So this report shows you the areas where the document lacks the accessibility for the differently able people. So document has different issues, and we can address those issues accordingly. Then in Microsoft Word, there is a function for accessibility. You can actually go to File and then check for issues and go to check accessibility. And it tells you the errors which are there in the document for accessibility. And you can actually go and resolve those errors, warnings, and you can go ahead with accessibility.
The third part is checking for color blindness. Next. So this is what the color filter on Amazon website looks to people with normal vision and people with color blindness.
So this is for the normal, and this is for the...
So without descriptive text, it is impossible to differentiate many of the options available over here. The solution for this was done by Gap, that is the provided labels for each color. And this is beneficial even for people with normal vision. For example, black and navy are too difficult to identify on screen. It takes out the guesswork for the user. In physical world, we cannot always control what colors appear next to each other, but in our content, we can definitely do that. So these are the color combinations that we must avoid. That is green and red, or green or red, or green or brown, blue and purple, because this is what they look to the colorblind people. Also, there's a Chrome extension which says, I want to experience like the colorblind. You can download that, and on any website, right-click on that, and it will show you how your content looks to people with color blindness, with people, for people with different kinds of color blindness, red and green colorblind or blue and green colorblind. So you can check those and remove all the glaring mistakes that you have in your document before the document is GA'd.
So what lies in the future for accessibility? So as you all know that we are in the era of machine learning, artificial intelligence, chatbots. So actually these technologies can help the people with disabilities, because using these technologies and tools, we can actually collect the data about the user's interests, habits, and user actions. And this data is then translated into a self-help documentation. That document pops up the help which is required or exclusive for that particular user. And in that way, we can actually achieve the accessibility going forward in the future. So this is about a responsive thought forecasting matrix. It was, this term is coined by a scientist who works in this area for user assistance.
So providing accessible content can create a difference in the quality of life for many. As responsible human beings, we should all be committed to creating an equal and integrated access for the differently abled community. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. We'll now open the floor for discussions and Q&A.
Any questions, please? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rohan. So I wanted to ask, as a technical writer or a content writer, are there any existing authoring tools which allow me to probably generate an accessible output of the same documentation we create? Like we have PDF formats, web format. Is there an accessible format which an authoring tool generates?
So this is really a good question, because here the approach is different. See, there are different categories of people who fall under accessibility issues, right? So suppose we create a document for a particular set of people. It may not be visible for the other category of people. So we cannot make exclusive documentation because it may not be feasible practically. And it may also not fall into the budget. But yes, what we can do, we can create the documentation, and then the tools which are available in the market, like PDF checker and the word checker, using that we can actually create documentation, but that would be really a general documentation which caters to all kinds of people with disabilities. Because here the point is, we have to ensure that, suppose I'm making documentation accessible for a particular set of people, but at the same time I'm not making it inaccessible to other set of people. So this is a really balancing act when we consider accessibility. And then you have to think about usability also, because if the product is usable and information is accessible, then only we can achieve the goal.
I saw somewhere in your slides you had mentioned something about defining language attributes. So could you just expand on that? I didn't quite get it.
So suppose, see, we are living in a world with different accents. So suppose you are playing a video or you are playing an audio, and suppose we belong to India, so we would like to hear that in Indian accent. So in that situation, we have to specify that attribute in the properties, system properties.
So that the screen reader will read it out in an Indian accent?
Yes, it does.
So that is really helpful for the people with auditory issues.
How and to what extent have you implemented it in your organization?
Yes. So we have conducted a survey, and we have started up this project. And at that point in time, we collected all this information, and then we thought, let's present it to the STC so that other people also get inspired by this project, and we can work all together and exchange ideas or the challenges that we come across, specifically limitations, because this is the most overlooked area as far as documentation is concerned. So I think it's a long way to go, but definitely we have already started it.
Thank you so much, Vikram. Thank you so much, Prachi. That was a wonderful session. I would like to invite Rajdeep on the stage to give a token of appreciation to the speakers. A big round of applause for them, please.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Another round of applause, please. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.